This broadcast is a fictional audio drama created for entertainment purposes. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter, the Perimeter Broadcast. If you are hearing this transmission, emergency conditions are ongoing by the time this broadcast ends. The water off our coast will no longer be described as water. I want to begin before that. At the first report, when the language still allowed for ordinary explanations. It is now 6:12 a.m. Pacific. The phenomenon we are relaying tonight, or rather this morning, is not weather in any sense the desk has been trained to describe. Beginning at approximately 5:41 a.m., we have received multiple independent reports from the Harbor District and from vessels operating within 8 nautical miles of the Tillamook Bay entrance describing a thin, continuous crust forming across the surface of the Pacific Ocean. The reports describe it as ice. I want to be careful with that wording. The reports describe it as ice. The air temperature at the harbor, as of the last verified reading, is 58 degrees Fahrenheit. The water temperature prior to this morning was in the low 60s. It is July. I need to say that clearly because everything that follows depends on it being July. There is no meteorological framework, as this desk understands it, in which the summer surface of the North Pacific produces ice at 58 degrees of ambient air. And yet the reports are consistent, and they are increasing, and they are not being contradicted by any source we have contacted in the last 31 minutes. A regional coordination desk operating out of the Coastal Emergency Office is currently calling the event a, quote, localized surface anomaly, unquote. That is the language they have chosen. They are asking the public not to speculate. This desk is not speculating. This desk is relaying only what has been verified by more than one source. The first verified caller was a long-line crew returning to the harbor before dawn. They reported that their trap lines, when hauled, came up sheathed in a clear crust that cracked and slid off in flat plates when handled. They described the plates as being about the thickness of a window pane. They described the sound as, and I am paraphrasing here, because we do not put callers on the air. They described the sound as similar to a car windshield failing in slow motion. That is a description as received. I want to move carefully. The National Weather Service, in a bulletin timestamp 5:58 a.m., is describing the reports as, quote, inconsistent with regional sea surface conditions and under active review, unquote. That is a hedge. That is not a denial. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, and we are staying with this. It is now 6:19 a.m. We have a second wave of reports, and I want to walk through them in the order they came in, because the sequence matters. At 6:03 a.m., a caller from the North Jetty area described the tide pools below the observation deck as, and I am paraphrasing, glassed over. The caller reported that the anemones and the small crabs visible through the surface layer appear to be, quote, held in place, unquote, the caller stated. And again, this is the desk paraphrasing a caller who is not on the air, that when they place a hand on the surface of pool, the surface did not give. It was cold, it was thin, and it did not give. At 6:07 a.m., a verified report from the small craft operator at the bay entrance indicated that a 15-foot skiff attempting to return from the outer marker was making unusual progress. The operator reported that the hull was, quote, sliding rather than cutting, unquote. The operator reduced throttle, and the vessel continued forward at the same rate. That report is confirmed. The vessel has since reached the harbor. I have been told the hull is being inspected. I have not yet been told what was found on the hull. I will return to that. At 6:11 a.m., a caller from a residence on the bluff above Cape Mears reported that the ocean, viewed from her back porch at first light, did not appear to be moving. She reported that she has lived at that address for 31 years, and that she has never seen the water flat in July. Not flat, meaning calm. Flat, meaning without motion. The desk cannot verify that from here. I am passing it along as received. The Coastal Coordination Desk has now added a second word to its bulletin. It is now calling the event a, quote, localized surface anomaly, thermal origin under review, unquote. That is a small change. I want to note it. That is the first time this morning I have heard official language add a physical mechanism to the description. Thermal origin under review. They are looking at temperature. The air temperature at the harbor, as of the reading taken 4 minutes ago, is now 56 degrees. It has dropped 2 degrees in 19 minutes. That is not, on its own, unusual for a coastal July morning. I am noting it because the reports are asking me to note it. This desk will continue to relay verified information. We are waiting on the next coordination call. Do not travel to the shore to observe the phenomenon. That is not our advisory. That is the advisory from the regional office. We are relaying it as received. It is now 6:26 a.m. I want to pass along something the desk is still trying to confirm. A verified caller from the fishing cooperative reports that a member of their crew, returning shortly after 5:30 a.m., attempted to bring a sample of the surface crust onto the dock for inspection. The caller states that by the time the sample reached the dock, it had not melted. The caller states the sample was placed on a wooden bench in ambient air of, at that time, 59 degrees, and remained solid for the duration of the caller's observation, which the caller estimated at 11 minutes. That report is unverified. I am passing it along because a second independent caller from a different vessel has just described the same behavior with a different sample. 2 independent accounts. That is why I am relaying it. This is not yet confirmed, but the reports are repeating. I need to be precise about what that means. Ice, as this desk understands, ice melts. Ice at 59 degrees of ambient air on a dry wooden surface melts within a small number of minutes. The reports we are receiving describe a material that resembles ice, forms like ice, cracks like ice, and does not behave like ice once it is removed from the water. I am not going to name that material. I am not qualified to name that material. Officials have not named that material. They are calling it still a surface anomaly. That language has not changed in the last 7 minutes, and I want to note when it does. The National Weather Service has issued an updated bulletin. The bulletin lists the following: unusually low sea surface temperature readings from 3 offshore buoys between Astoria and Newport, all reporting within the last hour, all reading between 32 and 34 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface. Those buoys were reading 61 degrees at midnight. I want to say that again for late listeners. Those buoys were reading 61 degrees at midnight. They are now reading between 32 and 34. That is a temperature shift of approximately 28 degrees in under 6 hours, across a stretch of open ocean roughly 130 miles long. The bulletin describes the shift as, quote, an inconsistency the service is unable at this time to reconcile with regional atmospheric data, unquote. That is careful phrasing. That is not a denial. We are continuing. It is now 6:34 a.m. I want to return to the small craft operator whose hull was being inspected at the harbor. The desk has received the inspection summary. I will read it carefully because the language matters. The inspection, conducted by a marine maintenance contractor on site, describes a continuous layer adhered to the outer hull of the vessel below the waterline. The layer is described as, quote, approximately 3 millimeters in thickness, transparent, structurally continuous with the surface material observed on the water, unquote. The contractor was unable to remove the layer with standard hand tools. A hot water rinse was applied. The layer did not respond to the hot water rinse. That is the phrasing in the report. It did not respond. I am going to note something here that is not in the report, but that the desk considers relevant. Hot water, applied to ice, produces melt. That is not a hypothesis. That is a property of ice. The material adhered to the hull of the vessel currently in the harbor is not responding to hot water. Officials have not commented on that finding. The regional coordination desk has been made aware of the finding, and its language has not yet moved. They are still calling it a surface anomaly, thermal origin under review. A verified institutional report from the coastal hospital has come in, and I want to include it now because it changes the shape of the morning. Between 5:50 a.m. and 6:20 a.m., the emergency department received 4 patients presenting with cold exposure injuries to the hands and forearms. All 4 are commercial fishing personnel. All 4 made contact with the water or with the surface crust in the course of ordinary morning work. 2 are being treated for what the hospital describes as, quote, deep partial thickness cold injury, unquote. I want to be careful with that. I am not describing the injuries. I am describing the classification. The hospital is not yet using the word frostbite in its outward-facing communication. The desk has been told by a source within the hospital administration that the word is being used internally. That source is unverified. I am passing along as one account from one caller, and I will confirm it before I use it again. The hospital is requesting that anyone who has made physical contact with the ocean surface or with any object that has been in contact with the ocean surface within the last 6 hours, contact their primary care provider or the emergency department for evaluation. That is the hospital's advisory. We are relaying it as received. That is not our advisory to give. It is now 6:41 a.m., and I want to advance to the transportation reports because they are the next thing the desk needs to relay. The Regional Port Authority, in a bulletin issued 4 minutes ago, has suspended all outbound small craft departures from the Tillamook Bay entrance and from the harbors at Garibaldi and Nettitz. The authority is using the phrase, quote, temporary hold, pending clarification of surface conditions, unquote. Vessels already at sea are being contacted individually and, where feasible, guided toward alternative approach vectors. The authority notes that at least 2 vessels have reported an inability to make normal headway, and that one vessel, a small commercial trawler out of Garibaldi, has reported that its propeller is, quote, laboring, unquote. I want to be careful with that word, too. Laboring is the operator's word. It suggests resistance in the water column that would not be expected in open sea. The desk is waiting for the follow-up. The Coastal Coordination Desk has now, and I want to timestamp this at 6:39 a.m., updated its bulletin. The event is now described as a, quote, localized surface phenomenon of undetermined thermal origin, monitored, unquote. That is a shift. That is the first time the word thermal has appeared without the qualifier under review, and they have replaced anomaly with phenomenon. I want to note that anomaly implies an exception. Phenomenon implies an observed thing whose nature is being examined. That language has changed in the last few minutes. I am flagging it. I have been told, and I am passing this along as received, that the National Weather Service will be issuing a joint statement with the Regional Coordination Desk within the next hour. The subject of that joint statement has not been shared with this desk. I will hold that thread open. When the statement comes in, I will relay it. A caller from the Cape Mears area, the same Bluff residence we heard from earlier, has called back. She reports in the last 10 minutes, the surface of the ocean visible from her porch has, quote, gone white, unquote, not the whole surface. A band of it, running from the base of the headland outward, in a line she estimates at half a mile long and perhaps 30 feet wide. The caller reports that the band is not moving. It is not breaking apart. It is not drifting with the swell, because there is no swell. I want to say that again. There is no swell. That is one caller's account, and the desk cannot verify from here, but it is a second caller in 28 minutes to describe the water off this coastline as motionless. Motionless is a strong word for Pacific Ocean. I am relaying it because it is repeating. It is now 6:48 a.m. The condition is being described still as localized. That word is doing a great deal of work in the current bulletins. I want to be honest with the audience. The desk expects that word to be one of the first to leave the language, if the reports continue as they are. I do not know when that will happen. I am watching for it. Do not attempt to observe the phenomenon at close range. Do not attempt to sample the surface material. Do not enter the water for any reason. Those are the standing advisories from the Regional Coordination Desk. We are relaying them as received. We will continue to relay them at each update. It is now 6:55 a.m., and a verified report from the offshore buoy network indicates that the buoy at the mouth of the Columbia River, which had been transmitting normally at midnight, has stopped transmitting entirely. The last reading, taken at 6:12 a.m., recorded a surface temperature of 29 degrees Fahrenheit. 29 degrees is below the freezing point of seawater. The buoy has not reported since. The desk is watching for it. It is now 7:04 a.m., and the language has moved. The National Weather Service, in a joint bulletin issued at 7:01 a.m. with the Regional Coordination Desk and the Coastal Marine Office, has revised its position. The event is no longer described as localized. The bulletin now uses the phrase, quote, an anomalous surface condition observed intermittently along the northern Oregon coastline Extent under active review, unquote. Extent under active review. That is a phrase I want to hold up for the audience. Extent under active review means the officials have stopped drawing a boundary around this. They are no longer telling us where it ends. 22 minutes ago, they were calling it localized. Now they are calling its extent an open question. That is a significant change, and I want to be careful about how I frame it. It is not a panic word. It is not a warning word. It is a bureaucratic word, and it is the kind of word this desk has learned to pay attention to. When an agency stops describing the size of a thing, it usually means the size of the thing has stopped being describable. The Joint Bulletin includes a second element. It states that reports consistent with the Tillamook County observations have now been received from 3 additional coastal counties to the south, and from at least 2 locations along the Washington coast to the north. The bulletin does not name the locations. It uses a phrase, quote, matching reports, unquote, that is stage 3 language, if the desk may be permitted the phrase. Matching reports means a pattern is converging. We are staying with this. A verified institutional report has come in from the Coastal Fisheries Office. I will relay it now. Between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m., the office received formal cessation of operation notices from 11 commercial fishing operators between Astoria and Coos Bay. The notices cite, quote, inability to conduct standard vessel operations in current surface conditions, unquote. 11 operators. That is not a normal morning. That is not a fog delay or a swell advisory. That is 11 independent commercial captains in 11 independent locations along 400 miles of coastline, all reporting within a single hour that they cannot work the water. I want that number to stand for a moment. 11. It is now 7:11 a.m. A caller from the Harbor District reports that the surface of Tillamook Bay itself, inside the entrance, is now showing the same continuous crust that was earlier reported only in the open ocean. The caller reports that the crust extends from the bay entrance approximately a quarter mile inland, and that it is thickening. The caller estimates the visible thickness, viewed from the dock edge, at approximately 2 centimeters. That is a doubling from the earlier window pane comparison, over roughly 1 hour. The desk cannot verify the thickness from here. The desk is noting the trend. I want to hold a thread open here. The trawler out of Garibaldi that reported its propeller laboring at 6:41 a.m. has not filed a follow-up report. The Port Authority has attempted contact 3 times and has received no response. The vessel is not overdue in the technical sense. The Port Authority has classified it as, quote, out of routine contact, unquote. I am noting that. I will return to it. Another verified caller, this one from the observation deck at Cape Kiwanda, reports that the surf line, which under ordinary conditions produces continuous audible wave noise, has gone quiet. The caller states that they walked the beach for approximately 15 minutes and heard, and I am paraphrasing, only the sound of their own footsteps. The caller states that the sand at the tide line is dry, and that the water, when they approached it, was not moving. The caller reports observing a gull walking on the surface of the water, not landing, walking. The desk cannot verify that observation. It is one account, from one caller in daylight, along a stretch of beach where the caller reports being the only visible person. I am relaying it because it is consistent with the earlier accounts of a motionless surface. This is not yet confirmed, but the reports are repeating. Officials are not calling the ocean frozen. They are calling it, as of 7:12 a.m., a surface condition of undetermined thermal origin observed intermittently. We are continuing to note the language as it changes. It is now 7:19 a.m. The Regional Utility Cooperative has issued an operational notice. Coastal water intake operations at 3 treatment facilities along the northern Oregon coast have been placed in what the cooperative describes as, quote, precautionary standby, unquote. The facilities are not offline. They are not drawing raw water at their normal rate. The cooperative has not linked this to the surface reports. The cooperative has stated only that intake sensors have registered readings, and I am quoting, quote, outside the expected operational range, unquote. I want to be honest about what this means. Municipal water treatment is not affected in the short term. Reserves are adequate. There is no advisory to conserve water at this time. I am relaying the notice because the desk considers it part of the pattern. Buoys have gone silent. A hull carries an unremovable layer. Treatment sensors are reading outside expected range. A trawler is not answering. 11 captains have gone home. The pattern is converging. The Coastal Coordination Desk, in a supplementary note attached to its 715 bulletin, has advised that residents of low-lying areas within 1 mile of the shoreline should, quote, remain aware of unusual conditions and defer non-essential travel toward the coast, unquote. That is the first restrictive advisory of the morning. It is soft. It is a defer, not a prohibit. But it exists now where before it did not. We are relaying it as received. The trawler is still not answering. I will note that at each update, until it does, it is now 7:26 a.m., and the joint bulletin has been amended again. It now reads, in relevant part, that the observed conditions, quote, appear consistent with rapid formation of a solid or semi-solid surface layer on ocean water at temperatures inconsistent with known freezing behavior of seawater, unquote. That is the closest official language has come this morning to naming what the callers have been describing since before dawn. Inconsistent with known freezing behavior. We are continuing. It is now 7:34 a.m., and I want to sign on again for anyone just joining us. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter. Emergency conditions are ongoing since approximately 5:41 a.m. this morning. This desk has been relaying verified reports of solid or semi-solid layer forming on the surface of the Pacific Ocean along the northern Oregon coastline. The layer resembles ice. It behaves in some ways like ice. In at least 2 documented respects, it does not behave like ice. It does not melt in ambient warm air, and it does not respond to hot water. Air temperatures at the coast this morning are in the mid-50s. It is the second week of July. Officials have, in the last 30 minutes, moved their language from localized surface anomaly to a phrasing that acknowledges the conditions are, quote, inconsistent with known freezing behavior of seawater, unquote. That is the status as of this update. I want to hold that summary in place and add the new material. A verified institutional report from the Regional Aviation Office indicates that 2 coastal small airfield operators, one at Tillamook and one at Astoria, have received unusual pilot reports in the last hour. The pilot reports describe, on visual approach over water from the northwest, a broad pale sheet extending from the shoreline outward. One pilot estimates the visible extent of the sheet from an altitude of approximately 3,000 feet at greater than 12 nautical miles from shore. That is one pilot's estimate. It is not confirmed, but it is the first time this morning the desk has received a range figure from above rather than a description from the surface. 12 nautical miles. I am noting that. I will return to it when a second estimate comes in. It is now 7:41 a.m. A caller from a residence on the south side of Nettitz Bay reports that a heron, standing in the shallows near the mouth of Whiskey Creek, has not moved in what the caller estimates to be 40 minutes. The caller reports that the bird is upright, that its posture is not that of a bird in distress, that it is not, quote, hunched or tucked, unquote, and that it appears from a distance to be alive. The caller reports that the water around the heron's legs has, and I am paraphrasing carefully, closed. That is the caller's word. Closed. The desk cannot verify that. The desk is passing it along because it is one observation, in one location, of a specific kind of stillness that has now been reported by 5 separate callers along 50 miles of coastline in under 2 hours. That is the description as received. The trawler out of Garibaldi has still not answered. The Port Authority now classifies the vessel as, quote, non-responsive, unquote. That is a step up from out of routine contact. A search and rescue coordination has been initiated, though the coordination note observes that, and I am quoting, quote, standard surface search procedures may not be applicable given current conditions, unquote. Standard surface search procedures may not be applicable. I want that sentence to stand. I am not going to gloss it. We are relaying what has been sent. It is now 7:48 a.m., and I have a verified institutional report from the Coastal Marine Research Station. I will read carefully. The station has, in the last 20 minutes, completed a first-pass analysis of a surface sample delivered to its facility at 6:55 a.m. The station describes the sample as, quote, a solid phase of what appears to be seawater or a seawater derivative, exhibiting a crystalline structure not consistent with any documented ice phase under standard atmospheric pressure. unquote, not consistent with any documented ice phase. That is the phrasing. The station notes that further analysis is ongoing and that the sample, quote, has not diminished in mass under any temperature condition applied thus far, up to and including sustained immersion at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, unquote. I need to slow down and be precise. A sample of what appears to be frozen seawater has been placed in 140-degree water for a period the station does not specify in its bulletin and has not lost mass. That removes the easy explanation. That removes several easy explanations. The station is not offering a new one. The station is stating what has been observed. I am passing along as received. The Regional Coordination Desk has now issued its second restrictive advisory of the morning. All beach access points within Tillamook County, and by supplementary notice, within the 3 counties immediately south, are closed to the public. Officials are not calling this an evacuation. They are calling it, quote, a precautionary limitation of shoreline access, unquote. State parks along the affected coast are suspending day use permits. The advisory asks that residents within a half-mile of the shoreline remain indoors and that vehicles not approach beach access roads. That is the current language. Precautionary limitation. I want to note that the word precautionary is still doing a great deal of work. It is the word the desk expects to leave next. It is now 7:55 a.m. A caller from the coastal highway describes traffic on Highway 101 in the northbound direction as unusually heavy for the hour. The caller does not use the word evacuation. The caller uses the word steady. The desk is aware that no official evacuation order has been issued. The desk is also aware that people are moving. Those two facts are not in contradiction, but they are worth noting together. We are staying on this. It is now 8:03 a.m., and I want to broaden the frame, because the reports are now broadening. A verified institutional bulletin from a national coordination desk, issued at 7:59 a.m., confirms that reports consistent with the Oregon observations have now been received from the coastlines of Washington, from portions of Northern California as far south as Cape Mendocino, and from the southern coastline of British Columbia. That is a range of approximately 800 miles of continuous Pacific coast, from a point north of Vancouver Island to a point south of Eureka. The bulletin describes the reports as, quote, geographically continuous and temporally simultaneous, unquote. Geographically continuous and temporally simultaneous. That is a phrase this desk has not heard in an official bulletin before. It means the officials have concluded that this did not spread. It means the officials have concluded it appeared everywhere at once. I want to be careful about that inference. The bulletin does not use the word appeared. The bulletin uses the phrase, quote, onset observed within a narrow temporal window across the affected latitudes, unquote. That is bureaucratic language for the same conclusion. Whatever this is, it did not begin in one place and move outward. It began at the same time, along the entire coast, or at least along every point on the coast from which we have received a report. A verified institutional report from a university lab at a coastal campus, which I am not going to name for reasons of source protection, indicates that instruments deployed offshore for unrelated research have recorded a sharp drop in ambient acoustic activity beneath the surface layer. The lab describes a drop as, quote, near total attenuation of biological and mechanical acoustic sources within the monitored band, unquote. Near total attenuation. The ocean beneath this layer has, according to this one instrument set, gone quiet. That is one lab. That is one instrument. I am relaying it because a second lab at a different institution has since forwarded a similar preliminary finding. 2 independent accounts. That is why I am passing along. It is now 8:11 a.m., and the trawler out of Garibaldi has been located. I want to relay this carefully. The Port Authority reports that a Coast Survey overflight has visually identified a vessel matching the trawler's description at approximately its last reported position. The vessel is upright. The vessel is stationary. The vessel is, and I am quoting the overflight report, quote, embedded in the surface layer to a depth consistent with normal hull immersion, unquote. Embedded. That is the word. The vessel is not sunk. The vessel is not drifting. The vessel is set into the surface, as though the surface has closed around it. The overflight reports no visible movement on deck. The overflight reports no response to signaling. Recovery operations are being described as, quote, under active planning, unquote. That is all I have on that. I will hold that thread open. It is now 8:19 a.m. A caller from the Harbor District reports that the pilings at the commercial dock have developed at the waterline a continuous white sheath. The caller reports that the sheath is not confined to the surface. The caller reports that the sheath extends visibly through the clear morning water, at least 4 feet below the waterline along the vertical face of each piling. 4 feet. That is not a surface layer. That is a volume. The desk cannot verify the depth measurement from here. The desk is noting that this is the first caller this morning to describe the phenomenon as having a vertical dimension. Everything before this has been surface. This is the first report of thickness, downward. I want to sit with that for a moment because I want to be honest with the listener. This desk began the morning describing a crust, a window pane, a skin. The current picture, if the reports are accurate, is not a skin. The current picture is a layer with mass beneath it. I do not know how deep that layer goes. Officials have not offered a depth. The Marine Research Station's earlier language about a crystalline structure not consistent with any documented ice phase suggests that whatever this material is, it may not obey the density behavior of ordinary ice. Ordinary ice floats. This desk is not in a position to say whether this material floats. This desk is in a position to say that officials have not yet used the word float in any bulletin this morning. It is now 8:26 a.m., and I need to relay a note that has just come across from the Coastal Hospital Administration. The number of patients presenting with cold exposure injuries has risen to 17. The hospital is now in outward-facing communication, using the word frostbite. That word was not in their language at 6:34 a.m. It is in their language now. The hospital is requesting that residents within the coastal zone limit outdoor exposure skin, particularly of hands and face, when in proximity to the shoreline or to any surface that has been in contact with seawater. The hospital notes that ambient air temperature does not appear to correlate with injury severity. Ambient air temperature does not appear to correlate. That is a phrasing. It is not the cold air causing the injuries. It is contact. That is what the hospital is telling us. Without quite telling us, we are continuing to relay verified information. It is now 8:34 a.m., and I want to sign on again because we now have reports from outside North America, and the shape of this morning has changed. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter. As of this update, verified reports consistent with the phenomenon observed along the northern Oregon coast have now been received from the northern coast of Japan, from the eastern coast of the Kamchatka Peninsula, from portions of the coastline of the Republic of Korea, and in a bulletin time-stamped 8:22 a.m. Pacific, from at least 2 locations along the western coast of South America. The National Coordination Desk describes a pattern as, quote, present along a substantial portion of the Pacific Basin perimeter, unquote, a substantial portion of the Pacific Basin perimeter. That phrase was not available to this desk at 7 o'clock this morning. It is available to this desk now. I want to be precise about what that means, because the audience deserves precision. The Pacific Ocean is the largest single body of water on the planet. If reports of this phenomenon are being confirmed at multiple non-adjacent points along its rim on the same morning, within a temporal window officials describe as narrow, then this is no longer a coastal event. This is a basin scale event. Officials have not used the word global. Officials are calling it at 8:28 a.m., quote, a Pacific Basin surface condition, unquote. That language has changed in the last 12 minutes. I am noting the change. It has stopped being coastal. It has stopped being regional. It has stopped being national. It is now being described by ocean basin. The Regional Coordination Desk has expanded its restrictive advisory. The previous half-mile inland zone has been extended to 1 mile. All coastal state parks, marinas, and public beach accesses within the 4 northernmost coastal counties of Oregon are closed until further notice. The advisory now specifically requests that residents do not attempt to collect, photograph, or handle any material observed on or near the shoreline. Do not handle the material. That is a phrasing. We are relaying it as received. It is now 8:41 a.m. A verified institutional report from a broadcast peer a coastal FM station operating out of a facility approximately 40 miles south of this transmitter, indicates that they have received a series of caller reports describing a low, sustained sound audible along the beachfront in their area. The peer station describes the reports as consistent with, quote, a continuous low-frequency tone at or near the threshold of human hearing, unquote. Their engineers are attempting to isolate the source. I want to be careful here. This desk has not, at this update, received any similar report from callers in our own coverage area. I am relaying the peer report as received, not as confirmed within Tillamook County. If similar accounts begin coming in from listeners in our area, I will note them. This is one small open loop. I will return to it. It is now 8:49 a.m. A verified caller from the North Jetty area reports that the surface layer at the jetty base has, in the last 20 minutes, become opaque. Earlier reports described the material as clear, as transparent, as a window pane. The caller now describes the material as, quote, white and dense, unquote, in a way that no longer permits visibility into the water column below. The caller reports that the change appears to have progressed inland from the open ocean in a slow but visible advance over the course of the last hour. The caller estimates the current inland reach of the opaque layer at approximately 300 yards from the jetty tip. 300 yards. That is a specific number from one caller. I am passing it along. I will look for a second confirmation. The trawler out of Garibaldi remains embedded at its last position. Recovery planning is described as, quote, ongoing but not imminent, unquote. That phrasing tells the desk that recovery is not going to happen this morning. I want to name that plainly because the Port Authority has not. Recovery is not going to happen this morning. It is now 8:56 a.m., and I have a note from the Coastal Utility Cooperative. The 3 water treatment facilities placed on precautionary standby at 7:19 a.m. have now been formally taken offline for coastal intake. They are switching to inland reservoir draw. The cooperative describes the change as, quote, indefinite, unquote. Indefinite is the word, not temporary, not extended, indefinite. The cooperative has requested that coastal residents reduce non-essential water use as a conservation measure during transition. That is a soft request. It is the first request of the morning that touches ordinary domestic life inside people's houses. The desk considers it a marker. The phenomenon is now visible from the tap. Officials are not calling the ocean frozen. Officials are calling it, as of 8:54 a.m., a Pacific Basin surface condition of undetermined thermal origin, currently under multinational coordinated observation. I want to hold that phrase up. Multinational coordinated observation. That is stage 3 language finding its full form. This is no longer a story a single agency in a single country is trying to describe. It is a coordinated observation across governments. Officials are still not using the word global. The desk expects that word within the next hour. I will note it when it arrives. Do not approach the shoreline. Do not handle any material. Do not attempt to sample surface material. Do not travel to the coast to observe the phenomenon. Those are the standing advisories. We are relaying them as received. We are continuing to broadcast, and the desk expects an updated coordination call within the hour. Stay with us. It is now 9:04 a.m., and I want to sign on again. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter. For those joining us, since before dawn this morning, this desk has been relaying verified reports of solid or semi-solid material forming on the surface of the Pacific Ocean along the entire northern Oregon coastline, and now, as of the most recent bulletins, along a substantial portion of the Pacific Basin perimeter. The material resembles ice, forms like ice, and does not behave like ice in ways that officials have not fully characterized. Air temperature at this coast, as of the last verified reading, is 54 degrees. It is July. Beach access is closed within 4 coastal counties. Coastal water intake operations are offline. A commercial trawler is embedded in the surface at its last reported position and cannot be recovered. 17 patients have been treated at the coastal hospital for cold exposure injuries acquired through contact with the material. That is the state of the morning at 9:04 a.m. I want to add the new material. The National Coordination Desk has, at 9:01 a.m., issued a bulletin containing language I have not heard from that office before. The bulletin reads in relevant part that observed conditions are, quote, no longer being characterized as harmless to normal maritime and coastal operations, unquote. No longer being characterized as harmless. That is a subtractive statement. That is officials telling us what a thing is not, because they cannot yet tell us what it is. That is the first bulletin this morning in which the word harmless has been used, and it has been used only to be withdrawn. I want to note that carefully. That language has changed in the last few minutes. A verified institutional report from the Coastal Marine Research Station indicates that the sample analyzed earlier this morning has been transferred to a secondary research facility with more capable instrumentation in an inland location. The station notes, and I will read this carefully, that the sample was transported in an insulated container maintained at ambient interior temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit for the duration of the transit. The station further notes that upon delivery, the sample was, quote, unchanged in mass and structure from initial receipt, unquote. Unchanged. A sample of what appears to be frozen seawater has now been held at room temperature and at 140 degrees earlier and has not changed. That removes another easy explanation. We are staying with this. It is now 9:12 a.m. A caller from Harbor District reports that the opaque advance previously observed at the North Jetty has now reached the commercial dock. The caller reports that the pilings, which at 8:19 a.m. showed a sheath approximately 4 feet below the waterline, now show a sheath that has continued downward beyond the caller's line of sight. The caller estimates the visible sheath at the near side piling at approximately 9 feet below the surface, at which point visibility is loss opacity. 9 feet. I am noting the trend. This is the second measurement of vertical thickness this morning. The first was 4 feet at 8:19. The second is at least 9 feet at 9:12. Whatever this is, it is not staying at the surface. The Pier FM station 40 miles south has updated its earlier report. They now describe the low, sustained tone in their area as, quote, present continuous and detectable on studio monitoring equipment at low, but consistent amplitude, unquote. Their engineers have logged the tone at approximately 7 hertz. 7 hertz. I want to hold that number. 7 hertz is below the standard threshold of human hearing, but within the range at which some listeners report physical sensation rather than sound. This desk has not, at this update, detected any comparable tone on our monitoring equipment. Our engineers have been asked to check. I will return to that thread. It is now 9:19 a.m., and I have a verified report from the Coastal Aviation Office. A regional carrier operating a small passenger route between two coastal communities has suspended service for the remainder of the day, citing, quote, unusual atmospheric density readings along the overwater segment of the flight path, unquote. Unusual atmospheric density readings. That is the phrasing. This is the first aviation side report of the morning suggesting that the phenomenon extends upward from the surface into the air column above it. The desk does not have a quantified figure. The desk has an operational suspension. I am relaying the suspension as received. Officials are not calling the ocean frozen. They are calling it, as of 9:16 a.m., a Pacific Basin surface condition of undetermined thermal origin, no longer characterized as harmless, currently under multinational coordinated observation. That is the running phrase. I want to note that it has grown since 7 o'clock by exactly 2 clauses. Officials add clauses when they cannot subtract uncertainty. It is now 9:26 a.m., and the desk has received a note that I want to relay before moving on. A field unit dispatched by the Regional Coordination Desk to a beach access point south of Cape Meares for the purpose of documenting the current inland reach of the surface material has not filed its scheduled 25-minute check-in. The unit is described as, quote, past scheduled contact by 4 minutes, unquote. That is not, on its own, unusual. Field units miss check-ins for many reasons. I am noting it because the desk is watching. I will return to it. This is not yet confirmed as a concern, but I am flagging it. We are continuing. It is now 9:34 a.m. I want to open this update with the field unit because that thread has not closed. The Regional Coordination Desk now describes a unit dispatched to the beach access point south of Cape Meares as, quote, out of contact for approximately 12 minutes, unquote. Out of contact. That is a step up from past scheduled contact. The desk has been informed that a secondary unit has been dispatched to the same location. That secondary unit has not yet reached the site. I will hold the thread open. A verified caller from a residence within the same access corridor reports that they have seen, from their front window, an official vehicle parked at the road terminus approximately 3/4 of a mile from their house. The caller reports that the vehicle appeared to have been at that location for at least 30 minutes at the time of the call. The caller reports that they have not seen anyone in or around the vehicle. The caller is being asked by this desk indirectly through the Regional Coordination Office to remain indoors and not to approach the vehicle. I want to be careful with that instruction. This desk is not directing residents. This desk is relaying that the Regional Coordination Office has asked the caller to remain indoors. We are relaying the advisory. We are not issuing it. It is now 9:41 a.m., and I have a note from our own engineering desk that I need to relay. Beginning at approximately 9:36 a.m., station monitoring equipment at KQWL 1620 AM has registered a low amplitude signal on our carrier at approximately 7 Hz. 7 Hz. That is the same frequency reported earlier by the Pier FM station 40 miles south. Our engineers describe the signal as, quote, present on the transmitter, present in the room, not attributable to any known internal source, unquote, not attributable to any known internal source. I want to be honest with the audience. That is our own signal we are describing. That is our own transmitter. The tone reported this morning from beaches and then from studio equipment 40 miles away is now present on the KQWL 1620 AM carrier. I want to be clear about what this desk can and cannot say. This desk cannot say that the tone is caused by the surface condition on the ocean. This desk cannot say that they are the same phenomenon. This desk can say that the tone was not present on our carrier at 7 o'clock this morning, that it is present now, and that our engineering personnel have not been able to attribute it to any equipment within this building. That is what has been verified. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Coal Harbor Emergency Relay Network, and we are noting the change. It is now 9:48 a.m. The National Coordination Desk has issued a bulletin describing the collective response posture effective immediately as, quote, containment and monitoring, not correction, unquote. Containment and monitoring, not correction. I want the audience to hear that phrasing carefully. The response is no longer described as an effort to reverse or resolve the condition. The response is described as an effort to observe it and to limit its interaction with human activity. This is a significant change in official framing. At 6 o'clock this morning, officials were investigating an anomaly. At 9:48, officials are containing a condition they no longer expect to correct. A verified institutional report from the Coastal Hospital Administration indicates that patient volume for cold exposure injuries has risen to 31, and that admissions are now being received from inland points as far as 15 miles from the shoreline. 15 miles inland. The hospital notes that in several recent cases, patients had not been in direct contact with the ocean surface, but had handled objects that had themselves been in contact, or in some cases have been exposed to air moving inland from the coast. Exposed to air moving inland from the coast. I want to sit with that. The material or its effect is now being transmitted, apparently, through the air itself. That is one hospital's characterization. That is one institutional finding. I am passing it along as received. 2 more coastal hospitals have, in the last 15 minutes, forwarded similar preliminary observations. This is not yet confirmed at the level of a joint bulletin, but the reports are repeating. It is now 9:55 a.m., and the field unit south of Cape Meares has been located. The secondary dispatch reports finding the primary vehicle at the road terminus. The vehicle is intact. Its engine is off. Its radio is intact. The vehicle is, and I am quoting the secondary unit's initial report, quote, unoccupied at the time of arrival, unquote. Unoccupied. No personnel present. No signs of struggle. No signs of injury. No items disturbed. The 2 members of the primary field unit are not at the vehicle. The secondary unit is being directed not to proceed beyond the vehicle location on foot. Search and rescue coordination has been notified. I am passing along what has been sent. Do not approach the shoreline. Do not handle any material observed near the coast. Do not attempt to sample surface material. Do not travel to closed beach access points. If you are within 1 mile of the shoreline, the Regional Coordination Desk asks that you remain indoors, close windows, and reduce exposure to outside air until further notice. Reduce exposure to outside air. That is the advisory in the language it has been given to us. That advisory did not exist 30 minutes ago. It exists now. We are relaying it. It is now 10:04 a.m., and I want to sign on again. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter. Emergency conditions are ongoing and have escalated in the last hour. Since approximately 5:41 a.m., verified reports have described the formation of solid or semi-solid material on the surface of the Pacific Ocean along a substantial portion of its basin perimeter, including the entire coastline of the state. The material does not respond to heat, does not diminish at room temperature, forms a vertical thickness of at least 9 feet from the surface downward at the harbor, and in the last 30 minutes has been associated by 3 coastal hospitals with injuries in patients not in direct contact with ocean water. A 7 hertz tone, first reported at a pier station 40 miles south of this transmitter, is now present on our carrier and cannot be attributed to any equipment within this building. 2 field personnel dispatched south of Cape Meares are unaccounted for at their vehicle. Officials describe the response posture as containment and monitoring, not correction. That is the state of the morning at 10:04 a.m. The 7 hertz tone remains present on our carrier. Our engineers have, at this update, ceased attempts to remove it. They have shifted, at their own discretion, to a monitoring posture on the studio equipment. I want to be honest with the audience about that. The station is not attempting to eliminate the tone. The station is watching it. That is a small operational change, but it is a change, and this desk has been asked to note it. We are staying on air. It is now 10:12 a.m. A verified institutional report from the Coastal Marine Research Station, forwarded from the inland facility handling the transferred sample, contains a note I need to relay carefully. The inland facility reports that the sample, held in a controlled environment at approximately 72 degrees Fahrenheit, has begun to, quote, propagate, unquote. That is the facility's word. Propagate. The facility reports that surfaces in contact with the sample, specifically the interior surface of the sample's containment vessel, have begun to develop a matching crystalline layer of approximately 1 to 2 millimeters in thickness. I want to say what that means without exceeding what the facility has stated. The sample is producing more of itself from an intact contained state in a warm, dry laboratory environment without contact with seawater. The facility has moved to a secondary containment protocol. The facility has not, in its outward-facing bulletin, described the material as unstable. The facility has described it as propagating. That word did not exist in any bulletin this morning until 10:11 a.m. I am flagging it. It is now 10:19 a.m. A caller from the outskirts of the town of Tillamook, more than 4 miles inland, reports that the shallow decorative pond in front of a business at the highway junction, which he passes each morning, has this morning developed a continuous white surface. The caller reports that the pond, which is fed by municipal water and not by any coastal source, has never in her memory shown any surface layer in July. The caller reports that she stopped her vehicle and observed the pond for approximately 3 minutes. She reports that during that time, a small landscape sprinkler cycled on, and that water from the sprinkler, on landing on the surface of the pond, did not visibly break the surface. The desk cannot verify that observation from here. I am passing along, because a second caller, from a residence approximately 2 miles from that intersection, has just described a similar layer on a household bird bath. 2 independent accounts, both inland, both freshwater, neither in contact with the Pacific. We are noting the pattern. It is now 10:26 a.m., and I want to place this update carefully. The Regional Coordination Desk has issued its 3rd restrictive advisory of the morning. Residents within the 4 northernmost coastal counties of Oregon are asked to remain indoors, to close windows and exterior doors, to avoid the use of outdoor water sources, and defer non-essential travel of any kind until further notice. The advisory is described as, quote, precautionary and open-ended, unquote. Precautionary and open-ended. Those 2 words do not usually appear together. in a coordination bulletin. Precautionary implies a specific short-term concern. Open-ended implies that no endpoint is available. Together, they describe an advisory whose reason is not being specified and whose duration is not being estimated. I am reading the language as it has been given to us. This desk is not interpreting further. We are relaying it as received. The 2 field personnel south of Cape mirrors remain unaccounted for. Search and rescue coordination has arrived at the site. Their operational guidance is described as, quote, not to proceed beyond a vehicle terminus, unquote, not to proceed. I want to note that a search operation has been directed not to search. That is the phrasing this desk is passing along. It is now 10:33 a.m. The National Coordination Desk, in a bulletin time-stamped 1 minute ago, has, for the first time this morning, used the word global. The bulletin describes the observed conditions as, quote, present at coastal points across multiple ocean basins, and consistent in character with the initial Pacific Basin observations, unquote, multiple ocean basins. That is the language. The condition is no longer a Pacific Basin condition. Reports from coastal points on the North Atlantic have now been confirmed. Reports from portions of the Indian Ocean Rim are described as, quote, under active verification, unquote. Officials are not, at this update, calling the phenomenon planetary. They are calling it, quote, present at coastal points across multiple ocean basins, unquote. That language has changed in the last few minutes. We are continuing to relay verified information, and the desk expects an updated coordination call before the hour turns. It is now 11:02 a.m., and I have a verified institutional report from the inland facility handling the transferred sample. The facility has, in the last 30 minutes, completed a secondary containment transfer of the propagating material and has, at 10:54 a.m., issued a preliminary characterization. The characterization reads, and I am quoting, quote, propagation rate under ambient interior conditions is stable and non-accelerating, with new crystalline deposition observed on all interior containment surfaces within approximately 18 minutes of enclosure, unquote. Stable and non-accelerating. That is the phrasing. I want to be careful. The facility is telling us that the material is not growing faster inside a room than outside one. The facility is not telling us that it stops. Non-accelerating is not the same as terminating. A second inland facility at a different institution has now confirmed the propagation behavior on an independently sourced sample obtained from the Washington coast at first light. That is a second confirmation at a second facility on a second sample from a second state. The behavior is not a laboratory artifact. It is a property of the material. It is now 11:19 a.m. A verified caller from the Harbor District reports that the surface of Tillamook Bay, viewed from the commercial dock, has now closed entirely from the entrance to the innermost pilings. The caller reports that the material is uniform, opaque, and at the closest visible edge, showing no line of separation from the pilings themselves. The desk cannot verify uniformity from here. The desk is noting the caller's description. Everything the caller can see from the dock is one continuous surface. That is a description as received. It is now 12:18 p.m., and the Regional Transit Authority has issued an operational notice I want to relay in full detail. Northbound traffic on Highway 101, above milepost 64, is being placed under, quote, restricted flow, unquote. The authority describes restricted flow as reduction of highway operations to one lane in the northbound direction, with all southbound lanes maintained at ordinary capacity. The stated reason is, quote, coordination with coastal advisory posture, unquote. Coordination with coastal advisory posture. That is the phrasing. It is not an evacuation. It is not a road closure. It is a metered northbound corridor above milepost 64, which the desk notes corresponds roughly to the southern boundary of the 4 northernmost coastal counties. The authority notes that the restriction is expected to remain in place, quote, through the current advisory period, unquote. Duration unspecified. I am relaying the notice as received. A verified caller from a residence adjacent to Highway 101, approximately 2 miles south of the restricted corridor, reports that traffic has been continuous and slow for the last 90 minutes. The caller reports that they have seen no southbound emergency vehicles pass their residence during that time. The desk cannot verify that from here. The desk is noting that one southbound arterial on one afternoon in one direction has not carried any observed emergency traffic for a period caller estimates at 90 minutes. That is one observation. I am passing along. It is now 1:44 p.m., and I have a verified institutional report from the Regional Broadcast Coordination Office. Effective 1:30 p.m., a group of 6 coastal FM and AM stations, including the peer station 40 miles south of this transmitter, have entered into what the Coordination Office describes as, quote, joint reduced power operational status, unquote. The stations are reducing transmitter output to approximately 60% of their normal levels on the recommendation of a joint engineering advisory. The advisory does not specify the reason for the reduction. The advisory notes only that the reduction is, quote, consistent with current observed carrier conditions across the coordinated group, unquote. Current observed carrier conditions. That is a phrasing. It is a bureaucratic acknowledgement that other stations on other frequencies along the same coast are seeing something on their carriers as well. This desk has been notified that KQWL is included in the coordination group. Our engineering personnel are, at this update, evaluating the operational implications. I will note any change to our own output when a decision has been made. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. It is now 2:31 p.m. A verified caller from a residence in the town of Tillamook, approximately 5.5 miles from the harbor, reports that a household humidifier operating in a back bedroom has, over the course of the last 2 hours, developed a continuous white crust on the interior surface of its reservoir. The caller reports that the humidifier was filled at approximately noon with municipal tap water. The caller reports that the crust extends up the interior wall of the reservoir to a line approximately 1 centimeter above the current water level. Above the water level. That is what the caller has described. The desk cannot verify the observation. I am passing along because a second caller, from a residence in Bay City, has just reported a similar layer on the interior surface of a covered pot of drinking water left standing overnight. 2 independent inland accounts. 2 enclosed indoor vessels. I will look for further confirmation. It is now 3:29 p.m. A verified institutional report from a 3rd coastal hospital, this one located in Lincoln County, indicates that the hospital has, over the last 2 hours, admitted 4 patients presenting with cold exposure injuries acquired at inland residences at distances of, and I am reading from the hospital's outward-facing note, quote, up to 22 miles from the shoreline, unquote. 22 miles. That is an increase from the 15-mile figure reported by the Coastal Hospital Administration at 9:48 a.m. this morning. The hospital notes that in all 4 cases, patients have been indoors at the time of exposure, and that in 2 of the 4 cases, the specific contact surface has not yet been identified. The hospital's advisory now specifies, in addition to the earlier guidance, that residents should avoid contact with any interior surface that shows visible condensation, frosting, or unfamiliar white deposit, regardless of proximity to the coast. Regardless of proximity to the coast. That is the phrasing. The advisory has stopped drawing a boundary around itself. I am relaying it as received. It is now 4:12 p.m. The National Coordination Desk has updated its running characterization. The bulletin now describes the observed conditions as, quote, present at coastal and near inland points across multiple ocean basins, with confirmed indoor propagation in a limited number of enclosed contexts, unquote. Confirmed indoor propagation in a limited number of enclosed contexts. That phrasing did not exist in any bulletin this morning. It exists now. The desk notes that the qualifier limited is doing work similar to the earlier localized. I want to hold that in mind. The desk expects that word to leave next. The 2 field personnel south of Cape Meares remain unaccounted for. Their classification has not changed. The commercial trawler out of Garibaldi remains embedded at its last reported position. Its classification has not changed. The 7 Hertz tone remains present on our carrier. Our engineers have completed their evaluation of the Joint Reduced Power Advisory and have recommended to station management that KQWL 1620 AM enter the reduced power operational posture within the next hour. Station management has, at this update, accepted the recommendation. I am relaying that decision as it has been made. The reduction will not be instantaneous. It will be conducted through a coordinated engineering sequence expected to take approximately 40 minutes. It is now 5:07 p.m., and I need to relay an operational note directly from our own engineering desk. KQWL 1620 AM will, beginning at 5:15 p.m. Pacific, commence a reduction of transmitter output to approximately 60% of normal levels, in coordination with the 6-station regional broadcast group. Our engineers describe a reduction as, quote, a precautionary operating posture consistent with observed carrier conditions across the coordinated group, unquote. The reduction is expected to be complete by approximately 5:55 p.m. During the transition, listeners in the outer reaches of our coverage area may experience temporary signal degradation. This desk will remain on air throughout the transition. The 7 Hz signal will remain present on our carrier. Our engineers have advised that the reduction is not expected to affect the tone, and is being undertaken on grounds our engineering desk describes as, quote, precautionary and operational, unquote. I want to be honest with the audience. This is the first change to the station's transmitter output in the course of this broadcast day. We are relaying it as it happens. It is now 5:41 p.m. Our engineers report that the reduced power transition is in progress and proceeding without incident. Transmitter output is currently at approximately 72% of normal levels and continuing to descend on the scheduled sequence. The 7 Hz signal remains present. It has not changed with the reduction. The desk notes, without comment, that this is exactly 12 hours since the first verified reports of the surface layer on the ocean at the Tillamook Bay entrance. 12 hours. I am naming the interval. I am not adding to it. It is now 6:14 p.m., and I want to sign on again. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter, the Perimeter Broadcast. Emergency conditions are ongoing. We have, in the last hour, completed the transition to reduce power operation on the recommendation of the Regional Coordination Desk and the Joint Engineering Advisory. KQWL is now operating at approximately 60% of its normal transmitter output. Our engineers describe this as, quote, a precautionary operating posture, unquote. The 7 Hz signal remains present on our carrier. It has not diminished during the reduced power transition. It has not increased. It is what it was. Our engineers have moved from a monitoring posture to what they're calling, informally, a coexistence posture. I want to say that plainly. This station is broadcasting alongside a signal we did not put on this frequency, and that we are not able to remove. That is the operational reality at 6:14 p.m. For those joining us for the first time this evening, I will summarize what has been verified today. Beginning at approximately 5:41 a.m. Pacific this morning, reports were received of solid or semi-solid material forming on the surface of the Pacific Ocean along the northern Oregon coastline. Over the course of the morning, the phenomenon was confirmed along the entire Pacific Basin perimeter, then at coastal points along multiple ocean basins worldwide, then in the early afternoon in inland freshwater bodies and enclosed indoor vessels within the affected regions. The material does not respond to heat. It does not diminish at room temperature. It propagates from contained samples in controlled interior environments. It is associated by multiple coastal hospitals with cold exposure injuries in patients not in direct contact with ocean water at inland distances now confirmed to 22 miles. 2 field personnel dispatched south of Cape. Mears this morning remain unaccounted for. A commercial trawler out of Garibaldi remains embedded in the surface layer at its last reported position. That is a standing record. Before I read the evening bulletin, I want to close a thread from this afternoon. At 4:12 p.m., the National Coordination Desk described indoor propagation as occurring in a, quote, limited number of enclosed contexts, unquote. I said at the time that the word limited was doing the same work the word localized did this morning, and that I expected it to be the next word to leave the language. It has left. The 6:08 p.m. bulletin no longer contains it. And I want to be honest about something else, because this desk relays what it gets wrong along with what it gets right. This morning, at 7:45, I told you I expected the word precautionary to go next. It did not. It is still here. Our own engineers used about this station's transmitter an hour ago. Officials are still calling things precautionary this evening, over a condition they have just described as stable at full intensity. I got that one wrong, and I am telling you I got it wrong, because the word that left was not the one I was watching. Localized left, harmless left, limited left, precautionary stayed. I am noting the pattern, because the pattern is the story, even the parts of it I did not predict. The National Coordination Desk has, at 6:08 p.m., issued the following statement, and I want to read it exactly as received. Quote, observed conditions on the world's ocean surfaces, and now within an increasing number of interior freshwater bodies, are stable at full intensity and are expected to remain so on operationally relevant timescales. All coastal and near coastal populations are advised to operate under the assumption that unprotected surface water may be unreliable as a medium for ordinary human activity, including navigation, immersion, drawing for consumption, and casual contact. End quote. I want to hold that statement up and be honest with the audience about what it contains. Stable at full intensity, expected to remain so, operate under the assumption that unprotected surface water may be unreliable. This is not a bulletin about an event that officials expect to end. This is a bulletin about a condition that officials expect to persist. That language has changed today. At 6 o'clock this morning, it was an inconsistency. At 10:30, it was global. At 6:08 this evening, it is stable at full intensity. I want to note the sequence. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network. It is now 6:22 p.m., and I have a verified institutional report from the Coastal Utility Cooperative. The 3 water treatment facilities placed on precautionary standby this morning, and then taken offline for coastal intake at 8:56, are now being reconfigured for extended inland reservoir operation. The cooperative describes the reconfiguration as, quote, structural rather than temporary, unquote. Structural rather than temporary. That is the phrasing. The infrastructure of this coast is being adjusted at the level of engineering rather than at the level of a shift schedule to operate without drawing from the ocean. That is the shape of the evening. Municipal water remains available. Non-essential water use continues to be discouraged. Reservoir levels are described as adequate for a period of cooperative is not specifying an outward-facing communication. I am relaying the notice. I am not extrapolating from it. We are staying with this. It is now 6:29 p.m. A verified caller from the Harbor District reports that the surface of Tillamook Bay, viewed from the commercial dock at the current low angle of evening light, appears white and uniform from the dock edge to the visible horizon. The caller reports that they can no longer distinguish the bay from the outer ocean beyond the entrance. The caller reports that there is no line where the bay ends and the sea begins. There is one surface, one color, one uninterrupted plane, from the dock to the western sky. That is a description as received. It is now 9:47 p.m., and I want to sign on again. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter. Emergency conditions are ongoing and are now, for the most recent bulletins, described as stable at full intensity. The 7 Hz signal remains present on this carrier. Our engineers report that the signal is now also detectable at low amplitude in the direct current line supply and transmitter room. The building itself is carrying the frequency. That is the phrasing our engineering desk has used. The building itself is carrying the frequency. I want to note that we are not attempting to remove it. A verified institutional report from the Coastal Hospital Administration indicates that patient volume for cold exposure injuries has stabilized. Stabilize in this context is not a reassuring word. It means that the rate of new admissions is flattened, not because contact has decreased, but because the affected population has been advised to remain indoors and has, in large measure, done so. Current census across the 3 coastal hospitals in the reporting network stands at 142. 2 have been transferred to inland facilities. The hospital administration notes that no discharges have occurred in the last 6 hours. No discharges. That is the phrasing. I am passing along as received. It is now 9:56 p.m. The Pier FM station 40 miles south of this transmitter, which first reported the 7 Hz tone this morning, has, at 9:51 p.m., ceased regular programming. Their overnight bulletin, forwarded to this desk, describes their operational status as, quote, reduce continuous carrier with periodic advisories, unquote. Reduce continuous carrier with periodic advisories. That is a broadcasting term. It means a station that has stopped producing its normal content and is transmitting only what is required to maintain its license and to relay emergency information. This desk has been asked whether KQWL will adopt a similar posture. The answer, as of this update, is that this station will continue to relay verified information at the current pace for as long as our engineering personnel judge it operationally safe to do so. That is the current posture. I will note any change. It is now 10:04 p.m. A verified institutional report from a national coordination desk contains a phrasing I want to relay carefully. The bulletin describes the current operational framework as, quote, a standing condition under continuous advisory, unquote. Standing condition. That is the language now. Not event, not phenomenon, not anomaly. Condition, and not temporary, not transient, not developing. Standing. I want to hold that up. This desk began the morning relaying an inconsistency. This desk is ending the day relaying a standing condition under continuous advisory. That is the arc of a single broadcast day. I am not adding to it. I am naming it. It is now 10:12 p.m., and I need to relay an update on the field personnel dispatched south of Cape Mears this morning. The search and rescue coordination, which had been directed at midday not to proceed beyond the vehicle terminus, has been formally suspended. The suspension order describes further ground search as, quote, incompatible with current surface conditions in the affected corridor, unquote. Incompatible. That is the word. The two personnel are being reclassified from unaccounted for to, and I want to read this exactly. Quote, subject to review under the standing condition protocols, unquote. Subject to review under the standing condition protocols. That is the classification. This desk is not going to interpret it further. I am passing it along as received. It is now 10:19 p.m. A verified caller from a residence on the bluff above Cape Mears, the same caller who reported at 6:11 a.m. this morning that the ocean did not appear to be moving, has called back. She reports that the sky, at full darkness this evening, appears to her to be, and I am paraphrasing carefully, correct. That is her word. Correct. She reports that the stars visible from her back porch are in their expected positions, that the visible constellations are recognizable, and that the moon, which is currently in its expected phase, is at its expected location above the horizon. She reports that this is the only thing about the evening that appears correct. I am relaying that observation as received. The sky tonight is behaving. The water is not. That is what has been described. It is now 10:27 p.m. The Regional Coordination Desk has issued what describes as, quote, final guidance for the current operational period, unquote. Final guidance. I want to read the key portion exactly. Quote, residents of coastal and near coastal regions are advised to prepare for extended operation under standing condition protocols. Ordinary near water activities, including but not limited to marine transit, coastal recreation, harvesting of marine resources, and use of natural surface water for domestic purposes, should be considered indefinitely suspended. Municipal, agricultural, and industrial adaptations to these conditions are under coordinated planning at multiple levels of government and will be communicated through standing advisory channels. End quote. Indefinitely suspended. Standing condition protocols. Coordinated planning. I want to name the shape of that language for the audience. This is a language of long duration. This is a language institutions use when they have accepted that a thing will not be returning to what it was. Officials are not, in this bulletin, using the word permanent. Officials are using the word indefinitely. In practical operational terms, those two words point to the same posture. I am noting the choice. We are relaying it as received. It is now 4:11 a.m., and this is KQWL 1620 a.m., Coal Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter, the Perimeter broadcast. We have crossed into the second morning. The 7 Hz signal remains present on this carrier. It has been present for approximately 18 and a half hours. Our engineers describe it, at this update, as, quote, unchanged, stable, coextensive with the transmitter, unquote. Coextensive with the transmitter. That is a language now. It is no longer described as a signal we are broadcasting alongside. It is described as a signal the transmitter now contains. I want to note that language has changed in the last 12 hours. The material on the ocean, from every location this desk has been able to verify, remains in place. There have been no reports of retreat. There have been no reports of thinning. There have been no reports of any point along any coast on this planet at which the ocean, tonight, resembles what it was yesterday. Officials are not calling the condition permanent. Officials are calling it at 4:03 a.m., quote, stable at full intensity and consistent with new operational baseline, unquote. New operational baseline. That is the phrasing. A baseline is a starting point from which future measurements are taken. The ocean, in the language of the coordination desk tonight, is not a thing that has changed. It is a starting point from which everything after this will be measured. A verified caller from the Harbor District reports that at first light this morning, the surface of Tillamook Bay looked to her like a floor. Not like a sea, not like ice, like a floor. She reports that gulls that would ordinarily be circling above the water are, instead, standing on it, in small groups at intervals along the bay. She reports that they are not feeding. They are standing. That is a description as received. The two field personnel south of Cape Meares remain classified as subject to review under the standing condition protocols. That classification has not changed. This desk will note it if it does. The commercial trawler out of Garibaldi remains embedded at its last reported position. That has not changed. The 17 patients who were the first admissions to the coastal hospital yesterday morning have been transferred inland. The hospital has, per its most recent bulletin, no active discharges. That has not changed either. I want to be honest with the audience, in the last minutes of this broadcast, about what has and has not been said today. Officials have not, at any point in the last 22 and a half hours, offered an explanation for material on the ocean. Officials have not named a cause. Officials have not offered a mechanism. Officials have not, in any bulletin this desk has received, indicated that a condition is expected to end. What officials have done is move the language, in measured steps, from inconsistency to anomaly to phenomenon to condition to standing condition to new operational baseline. Each step was smaller than the one before it. Each step was harder to notice. That is the sequence of the language today. I have related as received. The Regional Coordination Desk has issued a final restrictive advisory for this operational period. Residents are asked to remain within 1 mile of their normal residence during hours of darkness. Residents are asked to defer any travel toward or along the shoreline. Residents are asked to close and seal windows and exterior openings during periods of onshore wind. Residents are asked to consider ordinary surface water from any source unreliable. Residents are asked to operate under standing condition protocols until further notice. Remain within the perimeter. That is the advisory in the language it has been given. We are relaying it as received. We are not issuing it. Our engineering desk informs me that this station will maintain continuous carrier operation through the coming day. The station will continue to relay verified information as it becomes available. The 7 Hz signal will remain present on this carrier. Our engineers describe our current operating posture as, quote, indefinite, unquote. Indefinite is the word, not extended, not temporary. Indefinite. This desk will remain at this position. I do not know what the language will look like at 8 o'clock this morning. I do not know what the language will look like at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I know what it looks like at 4:16 a.m. on the second day of this condition, and I have relayed it as received. For anyone hearing this transmission for the first time, and for anyone who has been with us through the last 22 and a half hours, the standing advisories are as follows. Do not approach the shoreline. Do not handle any material observed on or near the coast. Do not attempt to sample surface material. Do not draw water from natural surface sources. Reduce exposure to outside air during onshore wind. Remain indoors during hours of darkness. Remain within 1 mile of your normal residence. Defer non-essential travel. Consider ordinary surface water from any source unreliable. Operate under standing condition protocols until further notice. If you are still receiving this transmission, we are still broadcasting. The 7 Hz signal is still present on this carrier. The ocean, along every coast from which we have received a verified report, is still in condition it has been in since 5:41 a.m. yesterday. There is no correction coming. There's only the next update. Remain within the perimeter. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network.